Squishies! Welcome back to another vlog. This is Ducktales Season 1, Episodes 17 and 18 from the case files of Agent 22, from the confidential case files of Agent 22, and Who is Gizmoduck? This was a great couple episodes, following my favorite character of the new series and my favorite character of the old series as the focuses. So I was pretty pleased with those choices. We haven't really had a Webby Scrooge episode yet. Their relationship was very warm in the old series, probably even more so than Scrooge and the boys. He was a little sterner with them and very warm with her. Here we see a different kind of relationship, and one I really like, where he comes to respect her in a way that he really hasn't shown with the boys. He respects them as kids, as apprentices perhaps, people who he is teaching in the ways of being an adventurer. He's willing to bring them along at least, but in Webby he's got a new partner, someone who is a worthy successor to Mrs. Beakley. And of course we get these awesome 60s flashbacks to Mrs. Beakley when she was young, which time-wise actually works out. Some of the dating on this show is a little questionable because stuff like the Gold Rush, 19th century events that Scrooge was supposedly part of, but this works out. The 60s are 50 years ago. If Mrs. Beakley was in her 20s then, she's in her 70s now, which seems to about fit how she's depicted, as kind of this badass old lady, but aging. In Dark Heron, we get an excellent design. Both the 60s version with that classic 60s bell-shaped haircut, I don't know what it's called. And then in the modern day, there's just little hints of age and, of course, the robot arm. We didn't see a body, which means she's coming back, which is great, because she's actually a pretty great antagonist for Mrs. Beakley. And, of course, the big thing this episode is the Gummy Bears tie-in, which is a choice. It is an interesting one, in part because it implies the existence of humans in Ducktales. Since the Gummy Bears the inhabitants of Castle Dunwin were human. It was a little hard to tell, at least on my viewing, whether the alchemists depicted in the Great Book were human or duck, or like the dog-nose people that often get used as stand-ins for humans outside of the ducks. But it's definitely an interesting choice. It makes me wonder, because they've had Darkwing Duck stuff, now they have Gummy Bear stuff, if they're going to and I know Sky Pirates are coming up, so it makes me wonder if they're going to bring in elements, modified elements, of all the Disney afternoon shows, or at least all the ones that were funny animal shows, as it's called. I think the only other one that they won't have... No, there's two actually that they haven't touched. They haven't done anything with Chip and Dale. I would love to see something from that show up. And they haven't done the one Bonkers, which I never really watched as a kid. Like, after Darkwing Duck, I moved on to the DCAU. kind of stopped watching the Disney Afternoon block and started watching the Kids WB block. So never really watched. I know there was a bunch of movie tie-in series that came after that. Never watched those. The I kept waiting for the Gummy Bears theme to show up in the music, because Gummy Bears has a great theme song, and I kept waiting for some reference to it to show up in the music. I didn't notice any, which is a little disappointing. I was really hoping for it when Webby starts bouncing. I did like the dialogue reference to it, about the armies bouncing here and there and everywhere, bringing chaos and destruction everywhere, whatever it was. Chaos and Destruction Beyond Compare, which were dialogue references to the old Gummy Bears theme songs. I don't remember the Gummy Bears that well. They were only on the Disney Afternoon for like a year. They were on a block shared with Ducktales before the Disney Afternoon was started for another year, I think. But that means Ducktales was on the air for at least a year or two longer than Gummy Bears, which in small child terms is forever. Yeah, because the original Disney Afternoon lineup was Gummy Bears, Ducktales, Chip 'n Dale, Tailspin. And then they would shift it. Every show would shift a half hour earlier in the block to make room for a new show every year. And they just kind of rotated like that. Anyway, like I said, I don't remember it very much. I don't remember if the show itself, if they ever used the term alchemy to refer to what the Gummy Bears did, but I sure hope they did, because that has all kinds of great resonances for me. It's something I've always had an interest in, this mixing of kind of right on the edge between science and magic. Alchemy is kind of ancestral to both. A lot of the Hermetic magic transition derives from alchemy, but so does chemistry, metallurgy, pharmacology. They all have their roots in the medieval alchemists. So it's this intriguing look back into history before there really was a science-magic distinction, and a reminder that that distinction is a distinctly modern phenomenon. This is not to say that you can wave a wand and make things happen. It's more to say science is a specific approach to magic that worked really well, so we kept using it. When it comes down to it, it's still the manipulation of arcane symbols understood only by the few to accomplish feats and wonders. Sounds like magic to me. So there's kind of a joke there in the idea of like bouncing from the alchemical elixir, because it is a red fluid, and red is a color associated with the Philosopher's Stone, which is associated with enlightenment and attaining perfection and heaven on earth. And here it makes you bouncy. Just all the more ridiculous, but it's also like, yeah, you can rise with its power, but you'll still be pulled back down to earth. There isn't really any way to achieve what it is that you're seeking to achieve. I am 99.9% sure that that is not something that is an intended reading of how this episode uses it. Being as I seem to remember, it was a red fluid in the old gummy bears as well. I think that's just a color for magic potions. But it's fun to think about it that way, I think. Yeah. Moving on, the Gizmoduck episode, also very solid. Oh, actually, I wanted to rewind a bit. One more thing I wanted to say about the Webby episode. Seeing Mrs. Beakley and Uncle Scrooge in their prime, it was really cool to see. This kind of James Bond-esque spy adventure with a really blatant prisoner reference guarding the entrance to the villain's lair. That was a fun element to bring in, and then returning to it in the modern day as kind of this relic of the past. The damaged old robot, the bouncy things still bouncing, the aging, lost Black Heron who's lost a limb. There's this, and the gummy bear stuff itself is all this sense of stuff from the past being unearthed and brought into the present, and it bringing, these new possibilities. That's what Black Heron is trying to achieve with the gummy berry juice, but what Scrooge actually achieves with Webby, passing on the knowledge and experience of the past. The stuff he learned from Mrs. Beakley in the flashback segments, he is teaching to Webby in the present, and in addition, he is teaching her the lessons he learned. And so, in the midst of these relics of the past, we have the child, emblematic of the future, who is bouncing here and there and everywhere, and, really kind of saving the day through Scrooge's trust in her. It's kind of a great confluence of themes working in that episode. So anyway, speaking of confluence of things, the Gizmoduck episode, which, much like Gizmoduck himself, assembles out of the armor, it was kind of a bunch of set pieces from different superhero things melded together. Beaks's press conference and declaration that he is Gizmoduck, for example, or Waddleduck, I should say, was very Iron Man. The zooming out over the water with the explosive and appearing to be killed by it was very Dark Knight Returns. Is that what it's called? The third Nolan Batman movie. There was another one that I'm kind of like, when he's carrying Beaks. When he's carrying Mark Beaks, at first it's very Superman carrying Lois in the classic scene from the first Superman movie from the 70s. It's all these different set pieces. Even the, trying to get his powers, the montage of him trying to get his powers to work and kind of messing up, could be a reference to the first Spider-Man or the similar scene in Spider-Man Homecoming. That said, it all assembles into something really good, because it does have its own fresh things to put in there, The kid losing faith in the hero is a common thing, and then getting it restored when the hero rises and saves the day. But the fact that Huey then helps essentially create Gizmoduck, because he adds the final piece of the puzzle, the linking together of the man and machine. That's very cool and relatively novel. The other thing I really liked was that Waddle Duck is essentially Uber for superheroes. Might as well just call it Ubermensch. Because that's what it is. You use the app, and then he sits up to you, and he does your thing, and it's wildly exploitative of the person doing it. Because that's how the gig economy works. And that's exactly what Beeks is taking advantage of. This notion that he owns Gizmoduck is a very tech CEO kind of way of looking at things. This, supposedly new disruptive idea that's really just an old idea recycled, and in the process ruining something that was publicly available and free and better. That's what's happening with the app. In this case, Gizmoduck's time as a hero is really more the old series, but he's still taking the concept of superhero and ruining it so that he can make money off of it. Much as you occasionally see, articles making fun of tech guys who are doing things like reinventing buses, but privately owned and more expensive. Or reinventing, bodegas, but automated and more expensive. It's kind of what they do, because they're not looking to improve things, they're looking to extract money from things. And that's Beeks' attitude. And of course, the show always has that tension where its main hero is a billionaire. So you end up with him as Gizmoduck's benefactor, and he's paying for Gizmoduck to protect Duckburg. But isn't that basically just privatizing his mom's job? Which is something I really liked, actually. I'm, on the record, not a huge fan of cops. But I actually can appreciate them in fiction. And making Fenton's mom, cannot remember if she had a name in the old show. It has not been given in the new one. Making her a cop is a great way to make her still very much have that working class kind of exhausted feel to her, while being a little less stereotypical than the trailer park middle-aged woman who never does anything and presumably lives off of disability or something. And plus she reminds me a little of Renee Montoya, and Renee Montoya is awesome. I know, there's more Hispanic female cops than Renee Montoya. There's two awesome ones on Brooklyn Nine-Nine as well. But something about the way she's drawn and the way she's voiced reminds me of a Duck version of Renee Montoya. Yeah. Really good stuff, really good couple of episodes. Really looking forward to doing more. I think that's about it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check me out on Patreon for early access to essays, vlogs, Let's Plays, and more. And I will see you all next time. Bye!